Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Story number 1, A Little More, written by DeRay Leaf. A little more. The hull groaned as frantic engineers coaxed just a little more out of the engines of the battered and beleaguered freighter. Her captain's eyes were glued to a small readout on the console before them. On their lips curled into a feral grin. Come on, girl, just a little more, just a little more. She was a good ship, dependable, not much to look at most human vessels. Function over form ruled the engineer's mindset, and vessels traversing the void didn't need streamlining. So brick with engines worked just as well and allowed them to fit a little more of everything into the frames. And more was always good. Especially when the captain's ship-grade plasma beam brushed up against the groaning freighter's frame and sheared off a number 5 engine in its totality. The other 9 engines just got overcharged a little more by the main engineer that stood in a pool of engine lubricant mixed with blood of his first engineering mate. His manic grin mirrored by the blur that was his hands across his console, shunting power in real time through systems built with triple redundancy as a bare minimum. A flick of his thumb opened a channel to the bridge, and even with certain death only minutes away, he managed to keep his spirits up. His voice distorted through the damaged comm channels, but his atrocious fake Scottish accent was still clearly audible. We lost number 5, Captain. I don't know how much more she can take, sir, but I'm doing my best. The captain blinked in surprise and looked up from their display as the engineering reports filtered in. The enemy ship that filled the display more and more forgotten for the briefest of heartbeats, and their thumb flickered their comm. Very well, Scotty. The Moor delivers once again. Just a little more. With their eyes falling back onto the display, the grin grew wider, yet the tinge of sadness creased their eyes. If only they'd done more sooner. If only they had arrived in system 3 Earth standard cycles for 4 or roughly 2 local days, a small convoy plying the trade lanes in this part of the so-called Crabby Federation. The race that claimed these systems had a name that was impossible to pronounce for human vocal cords, and they looked like the bastard love child of a huntsman spider and a horseshoe crab, so the Crabby nickname was adopted early on. Their looks notwithstanding, there actually were humanity's earliest and strongest trading partner. For all their fierce looks, though, the crabs were in essence a race of benign explorers, docile and hard to anger. Not to mention plain adorable when still young. They had stolen the hearts and the minds of any humans coming across them. This fact had led to the conflict in the end, though. The crab's docility made other empires eye them as easy prey. One of the neighboring empires had sent a fleet and began annexing systems left and right, and now, for the first time, human ships met these invaders. No formal declaration had been made, so the human vessels still had their neutrality, which the small trading convoy had abused to the fullest. Ostensibly doing routine trading routes, every ship had returned with their holds full of crabby refugees, the company actually running their profits into the ground by trying to just get a little more of the refugees out of harm's way. The invaders had taken far too long to catch on, and that had made the convoy complacent. Doing the last run for more refugees with invader ships already in system had been a mistake. One that the captain commanding the lead freighter regretted immensely right now. But they would make up for it. Just a little more effort. Just a little more. An invader cruiser had dropped out of FTL right on the flank of the 5 freighters of their lone crab corvette escort. The escort dying in gouts of atmosphere as the invader's plasma beams leisurely cut its hull into pieces. The captain and the crew grimaced as the radio contact with the corvette cut abruptly. Only minutes before, they had been exchanging good-natured barbs about the fact that their class of freighters had a profile that looked like the rune for very rude action involving crabby reproductive organs. And then the cruiser jumped in, and the jokes died along with the corvette's crew with startling abruptness. The invaders had demanded the human ships to power down and prepare to be boarded. In response, the human ships had poured on some more speed instead, the FTL drive spooling up and just needing a little more time. The time that the captain of the lead ship elected to give them. They didn't even need to ask their crew. A mere glance at the first officer had him slap the control panel, while the hull of the freighter vibrated with the dull thuds of explosive bolts being detonated. The captain opened a channel to the invader's ship. "This is Captain Bundy of the UNSCV, Roger Moore. We're on a humanitarian mission and will depart this AO within the next quarter cycle. Any acts of aggression towards us will be seen as an act of belligerence towards the whole of the United Nations of Seoul. You have been warned." The prepared speech was drilled into the head by members of the Earth Diplomatic Corps that had known that they could not stop civilians from wanting to do more for the refugee effort. So they just planned for every contingency. The invaders had bellowed their displeasure as the other 4 freighters hooked the cargo containers that the Roger Moore had just jettisoned and took them under tow. The Moore itself had defiantly put herself right in the cruiser's firing solution and coming to a relative halt, daring the cruiser to fire. And fire it did. Plasma beams cut into the freighter's outer hull and vented compartments along the entire length of the ship. But instead of dying or fleeing, the invaders, to their horror, found the blocky human ship accelerating towards them. Nobody ever charged straight into the firing solution of a cruiser like this. Nobody was ever that defiant. Nobody could be that stupid. Could they? The confusion bought the Moore just a little more time. She crossed more and more of the distance separating the 2 ships, and behind her, the other 4 freighters jumped to FTL and safety. The captain snapped out of their memories and grinned through bloody teeth as the main display winked on with the first visual contact between humans and the invaders. A small bark of laughter escaped the captain's lips as the invaders turned out to look a lot like 7-foot-tall teddy bears. The universal translator the crabs had sold humanity, kicking in to make frantic growls and bellows understandable. It didn't convey tone, but the way the bear on screen was gesturing made the distress very clear. "Human vessel, veer off. You've made your point. Your bravery display is accepted. Veer off." The captain just looked up and grinned wide as they flicked the damaged comms to transmit shipwide. "Too little, too late. I have but one regret as we die here today. We won't see more of you die when your navy gets here. Once more into the breach, gentle beings. Once more!" The invader captain reeled back, stunned at the defiant roar coming from the comms channel, and then reeled even more as the human ship struck the cruiser's armored hull. Momentum overtaxed the shields and integrity fields, but the armor held. Inside the Roger Moore, the captain died smiling as the front bulkhead crushed their way, and deep within the bowels of the stricken ship, the chief engineer played one more trick. His eyes closed in acceptance as he almost casually brushed his thumb across the panel. The world and his life ended in a brilliant whiteness as the emergency reactor overload he initiated transformed the UNSCV Roger Moore and the invader cruiser into an expanding ball of heat and radiation. And thus, the first shots of the war were fired. One ship for each side died, but many more would follow. Humanity was mobilizing, inspired and galvanized by the actions of a few intrepid traders that decided to do just that little bit more. End of story. Story number 2. Peace was never an option. Written by Nora. Peace was never an option. When we were born, our world gave us a simple choice. struggle painfully, or die peacefully. All those you see before you screamed a battle cry with their first breath, in defiance of the very order of the world. We fought heat and cold, wind and rain, the highest mountains and the deepest oceans, and we conquered them all. Because peace was never an option. We began as toothless, clawless, hairless apes of the African savannah. That same savannah where lions and hyenas stalked the grass, hippos guarded the rivers, and crocodiles lurked in the watering holes. We killed them. We killed them until those who were left were barely a speck of the earth. Because peace was never an option. We killed each other too, over food, over land, over lovers, over mountains and rivers, over who was born when and what words were in each other's books, over the color of our skin, over the contents of our treaties. We killed and killed and killed until rivers ran red with blood. All were damned, choked with the bodies of the fallen, until ash fell like snow upon the ground from the ever-hungry corpse fires. Because peace was never an option. No thing was safe from our wrath. We killed the locusts in our field, the mice in our homes, the lice in our hair, the bacteria inside our bodies. Even the atom was sundered by our relentless struggle to kill. We shackled ourselves. From time immemorial, we shackled ourselves. But now, even more so, we put on thick chains around our limbs and collars on our necks, declared there to be rules in engagement, and refused to use our most terrible tools upon each other. Instead of laying down our arms, we obeyed our rules of war. Because peace was never an option. Now we sail across the stars, with more than just our Mother Earth to nurture our bloodlust. And you come to us with your warships and an ultimatum. You tell us to submit to you and live in peaceful servitude, or die in war. You even made a big show of destroying several civilian ships to demonstrate your power. And don't misunderstand, you are powerful, yet you are surprised that we resist. Surprised that our response to violence was not cowed deference, but indignant retaliation. You asked us why we chose war, when the price of peace was simple obedience, and the answer is really quite simple. Because peace was never an option. Excerpt from Sergei Kalitska VII, ambassador for the coalition, to his counterpart in the Bases Imperium, as he declares the beginning of what would be known as the 600 years of war in 82 HE, Human Era. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons: Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barkey, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Lord Azrakul, and Arcadian.